Hello. I want to talk about mitochondrial disease today. Um, this is a disease that my son has, and he was born with it. And the reason I want to talk about it is because it's really rare, and as I've had to deal with this all of my son's life, because it's so rare. Even in medical situations like the dentist or going to the doctor, it's not something that a lot of people are familiar with. So there's this loneliness and aloneness that I've felt in my life, at least throughout my son's life in dealing with this. Especially being a single parent, I don't have, I don't really have anyone to bounce things off of, this kind of stuff. So there's probably there's a lot of parents and there's a lot of people out there dealing with rare genetic diseases, and it's just really stressful and it feels really hopeless at times. So my son was diagnosed. I used to live in Japan, and he was born there. And so it was especially confusing for me. He was diagnosed around 4 years old with mitochondrial disease and specifically Leigh syndrome. I made the mistake of looking on the internet after he was diagnosed, and it was grim. Most children with Leigh syndrome, they die within a couple of years, and living past 5 years old is rare. And my son was already 4 at the time, so you can imagine my feelings of despair. And I had two older daughters that I was also raising, and having a child who is disabled, who has special needs. When you're a single parent and you have other kids, I looked ahead. I looked to the path ahead, and I thought, how can I go on? There were times that it was extremely dark. But I want to say, the reason that I'm making this video is that, that was when he was 4 years old, and he's going to be 13 this year. So he made it. He made it for 8 years after that diagnosis. There's been wonderful times in his life and in our lives since then. So because the genetic diseases and mitochondrial diseases there's such a wide spectrum. Even with Leigh's disease, which is one of the more severe ones, there's also a wide spectrum, and there's always hope. And the therapies and treatments are better now also. So, the things that you read on the internet are, they're case studies that are sometimes years old, and things have changed a lot. And, it's just that the internet sometimes doesn't catch up with the here and now, especially when it comes to medical things. So I just want to say, hold out hope, and don't give up, and focus on your child, or whoever it is that's dealing with these kind of things. So, I guess I have a unique perspective, since I raised my son for half of his life in Japan, and then half of his life, or less than half of his life here in America. in California specifically. So, you know, there's a lot of challenges when it comes to getting medical advice and medical help with rare diseases, because, you know, of course, you know, his genetics doctor is really familiar with it, but other doctors generally are not. You know, when I first lived when I first moved back to America, I lived in Arkansas, and my son's doctor had never had a patient with mitochondrial disease. So, you know, it's a little daunting facing these kind of things, you know, and then you worry because, you know, any little lapse in his treatment or a mistake, and, you know, he can go into metabolic shock, and, you know, there's a whole host of things to deal with, right? So anyway, you know, my son, I'll talk about my son a little bit. When it comes to mitochondrial diseases, kids are normally, they're born, you know, in their first year or two of life are sometimes completely symptom-free. And that was my son's case. He was a pretty normal baby. You know, when he started getting older, you know, I noticed there were delays in his development and things like that. But you know, I didn't suspect that it was something serious until he got diagnosed. So it's devastating. And then you know, milestones that he reached, you know, like walking and speaking, he regressed from those, you know. So he doesn't speak much now, and he's in a wheelchair, and he doesn't walk anymore. So watching those things happen is hard. It's hard, but my son enjoys his life. He loves video games. He loves his friends at school. So he has a full life. So, you know, I'll talk more about these particular aspects of things I've had to deal with, you know, when it comes to the medical systems and how things are in Japan and how things are here. And you know, things about the challenges that face people when they're dealing with these kind of rare diseases, just in the day-to-day, you know, and dealing with different kinds of things. So anyway, if you want to hear more, or if you're interested, just comment or let me know. Thank you for your time.